My name is Clay Tajon. I teach U.S. History, Dual Enrollment, Western Civilization through Southeastern Louisiana University, and I'm the head baseball coach at Franklinton High School in Washington Parish. The class that you'll see is a sophomore U.S. History class, and in this sophomore U.S. History class, we will be beginning World War II. In this class, it is a pretty high-achieving class. There are 2 students that will receive accommodations. All students will receive a guided note packet. The 2 students with accommodations, the first one will receive a completed note packet and a highlighter. They will highlight the key information. The other student will receive a hard copy of my notes where it meets their accommodation, a visual accommodation where they have the notes for their self rather than on the board. So in my presentation, students will record key terms, key information, and in my lecture, I will provide the information on the board. I will expand on that information, but I also will provide pictures to help detail the information and also some short video clips so that I will meet all learning types. Okay, so with details in mind, how we start the chapter with World War II, first off, we begin it immediately when we return from Christmas break. And so we focus on a deep, detailed dive on a character analysis of our antagonist of World War II. And so history is a story. And so when we watch a good movie or read a good book, those that are interesting spend time on character analysis. And so when we get back from Christmas break, this is what's on the board. I just tell my students to copy this down, and we're going to essentially look at some images and determine the personality of a person. So their choices are happy or sad, loving or hateful, male or female, talented or not talented. And so I twist this to the students as this is practice for the LEAP test, where you might have to make an educated guess on a question you may not know. What they do not know is, the plot twist of this is I'm going to educate them on that Hitler was actually an artist before he became the man responsible for murdering 11 million Jews or 11 million others in these camps. And so the first picture they see is Jesus, baby Jesus, with Mary. And so then they make inferences like, oh, well, this artist is probably a Christian. Then we start to see architecture. They notice the detail of buildings. We see the castle here. I go on a little side tangent here about how this was one of the castles that was an inspiration to Walt Disney. So maybe they start, thinking of the connections of the happiness that we have with Disney. And then we see pictures here of dogs or a bouquet of flowers. And this is where students come to the conclusion that there's not too many angry or evil people in the world that paints pictures of flowers. And it kind of continues through that. And then so we come back to those questions. And so what I like for my students to do is they'll share and they'll essentially come to a conclusion of, Coach, it was a happy, loving male that was talented. And that's most of them and most of the conclusions. And then we discuss what made them happy or hateful, or why was it maybe a male or a female, talented or not talented. Most of them say talented, male, that was loving and happy. Like I said, we've made connections that it's possibly a Christian. And then we talk about possibly some guesses, but then I go to the next slide. And so what I've done in just a brief bell work is my students are now deep diving and interested into the background of someone like Adolf Hitler. Usually I have no students that know that he was an artist, except for a couple art students possibly. And so now instantly what I can do is take them on this deep dive, get into character analysis of first Benito Mussolini of Italy and then Adolf Hitler. And then now we can understand the methods behind the madness of not just the guns and the bullets and dying in World War II, but the men and their character of what actually caused it.
Coach Tajon uses a lot of different sources like pictures and videos to show us the importance of history. He's one of the best history teachers I've ever had.
This is a bundle of sticks, okay? And what this represents is if I take one of these sticks out, I can easily snap it, right? But if I have all these sticks together, it becomes harder to snap. So what that represents is strength by number, or strength in unity. In Italian or Latin, what that is going to be is a fascia. So essentially what he says is individuals in Italy by themselves are weak. But if everyone comes together, our strength and unity, we can be a strong nation. Examples of totalitarianism. So religion. Now we'll talk a little bit about Hitler's religious beliefs. That's one of the things that a lot of people ask. What was his religious beliefs? So example of some of the detail that my students cover, we look at Hitler's background. One of the first misconceptions or details that Hitler was German. He was not German, he was Austrian. But this is where my students begin to kind of tap into possibly some sympathy or empathy for Hitler, maybe why there is some instability in his household. So we talk about 3 of his older siblings will die from the common cold at 2. The next brother, Otto, will die at childbirth, and then he is born. And my students start to see many instances of this in Hitler's life where people around him die, but he stays healthy. People around him struggle, but he seems to overcome it. And my purpose of that and why I focus on that detail is so that my students can kind of see that some things are just destined or some things are meant to be. History is not always good. There are evil or bad things, and it was just meant to be for Hitler to have that leadership. So we focus on when Hitler was 11, his brother Edmund, his close friend, died of measles. And so I asked my students to maybe focus on how that would affect them at the age of 11, or if they have had someone close in their family pass away, what is that effect? And some students do share that, and they talk about how difficult it may be.
Coach Tajon makes it very well known that the world wars and the fighting is super fun to teach about, but he also makes the Roaring Twenties and the early American settlement very fun to learn about and to teach about. He makes it where each part of history is important and vital, not just the fighting, but also like the Roaring Twenties and, like I said earlier, the early American settlements.
This a lot because of the social media, but Hitler is really going to do a very good job of propaganda. So spreading one-sided information, right, designed to persuade. You will never find a negative piece of information in the media about Hitler. All you're hearing is positive, savior, loves Germany, a veteran of World War I. It would be an Italian tux, but suit and tie. He's dressed differently. Anybody have an idea of why he is wearing professional dress or tux or suit and tie and everybody else is in military? Now remember, he's a veteran. We know that. Why would he dress differently? Okay.
Because he's putting himself as the leader.
Okay. He is this. All right. Okay, good. He is making himself distinct. He also wants to make it look like this is a business takeover. This is a sophisticated takeover. He is not some military monger that's coming in to overthrow the country by military power. He is taking this thing over as a sophisticated, intelligent, destined leader of Italy. When he walks in a room, everyone's looking at him. All eyes and attention are on him. So once again, think about those red flags being raised here constantly with his characteristics. His body language, watch how he behaves.
Benito Mussolini rules with an iron grip. Under his fascist regime, opposition of any kind is brutally repressed.
So once we have acquired the information through our note-taking process, which through the note-taking process they are given a packet or guided notes, and the purpose behind that is so they are not just frantically writing down information, but they can look at the pictures, listen to me explain things, and we do implement some shorter videos. But how I check for understanding through this process is with a Venn diagram, and we set it up with Hitler on one side, Mussolini on the other. We also establish kind of a checklist. And what my students will do as their exit ticket on Google Classroom, I will post a scavenger hunt of sort for Joseph Stalin of the Soviet Union and Hideki Tojo, the Minister of War in Japan, and they will do similarities with those two. And so as we go through this, I get my students started first with Mussolini, and it's very simple, and we understand the comparison and contrast of these two. We just start with where they're born, and then after that I give it to my students, and it's their job to try and find the comparison and contrasting information of these two men. And what they begin to see is they have a lot of things that are very similar, but also things that make them uniquely different. And so these two men, through their background and through that youthful, formation where they become the men they are, it is easy to relate to them as a struggling person. And remember, a lot of people in the world during this Depression time, they are struggling. So as I reflect on this lesson, one thing that I wish I would have done, and one thing I will do in the future, is after I do my introduction or the icebreaker with Hitler as an artist, what I will do, or what I wish I would have done, is get my students to make inferences or predictions before we go into a deep dive of these two people. So maybe just show them a picture of Hitler, show them a picture of Mussolini. Most of them know that they were antagonists, or that they are two of the most infamous men or leaders in world history, but maybe what was their childhood like? What are maybe some things that we know today that we can connect to someone maybe that is a troubled, or maybe a very controlling dictator, things that they already know, and then make inferences on those, and then see if we can arrive at a conclusion where those details that they predicted might align with the ones that we will conclude with.